In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, where skyscrapers kissed the sky and ambition ran as deep as the Chattahoochee River, there lived a woman whose name was whispered with admiration in corporate circles. Victoria Kane wasn't just another successful entrepreneur. She was a force to be reckoned with. Born into modest beginnings, Victoria had clawed her way through life's toughest challenges, transforming her dreams into reality. Today, she stood at the helm of Luxestay Hospitality Group, a collection of boutique hotels known for their elegance, comfort, and exceptional service. Her journey from a small-town girl to a multi-million-dollar CEO was nothing short of inspiring. On this particular evening, the city buzzed with energy. The annual Business Innovators Summit had just concluded, leaving behind a trail of networking opportunities and groundbreaking ideas. Victoria, dressed casually in fitted jeans, a sleek blazer, and comfortable flats, decided it was time to unwind. She hadn't planned on staying overnight. Her penthouse office doubled as her home, but after hours of back-to-back meetings, she craved a quiet space to decompress before heading back to work early the next day. Besides, what better way to test her own product than by experiencing it firsthand? Victoria chose one of her newest properties, a gleaming hotel nestled in the upscale Buckhead district. This wasn't just any hotel, it was her pride and joy. From the marble floors engraved with intricate patterns to the hand-picked art adorning the walls, every detail reflected her vision. She had poured her heart into designing the place, ensuring it exuded warmth and sophistication. As she stepped inside, pulling her leather tote bag closer to her side, she felt a flicker of excitement. This would be her first stay here since its grand opening 6 months ago. The lobby was alive with activity. Guests mingled near the concierge desk while bellhops hurried past with luggage carts. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the room, and the faint scent of lavender wafted through the air, a signature touch Victoria insisted on for all her hotels. Yet despite the opulence surrounding her, something felt off. A young man, stationed behind the front desk, barely glanced up as she approached. His name tag read Greg, and his expression suggested boredom rather than professionalism. "Good evening," Victoria said warmly, offering him a polite smile. "I'd like to check in, please." Greg finally looked up, his eyes scanning her outfit quickly before settling on her face. There was a pause, a fraction of a second, yet long enough to make Victoria's stomach tighten. It was the kind of look people gave when they made assumptions based on appearances. She'd seen it countless times throughout her career, but tonight it stung more than usual. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Greg replied without consulting his computer screen. "We don't have any rooms available right now." Victoria blinked, momentarily stunned. She resisted the urge to frown or argue. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, keeping her tone calm but firm. "Are you sure? I thought I'd reserved a suite earlier today." Greg shook his head dismissively. "No reservations under your name, ma'am. And even if there were, we're completely booked tonight." Something didn't add up. Victoria knew the occupancy rates for her hotels like the back of her hand. While this location often attracted high-profile guests, it wasn't unusual for last-minute cancellations to free up rooms. For Greg to claim zero availability seemed suspicious, especially given the steady stream of guests checking in around them. Still, she refused to cause a scene. After all, she prided herself on handling difficult situations with grace. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping aside. Her mind raced as she processed what had just happened. Was it possible that someone had genuinely messed up her reservation? Or was there another reason she'd been turned away so abruptly? Either way, the encounter left a bitter taste in her mouth. As she moved toward a nearby seating area, Victoria pulled out her phone and opened the Luxestay app. Sure enough, her reservation confirmation popped up on the screen. Not only had she booked a deluxe suite weeks ago, but several other rooms were listed as vacant as well. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but Victoria forced herself to take a deep breath. She reminded herself that reacting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she needed to think strategically. Sitting down on a plush velvet chair, Victoria observed the lobby with fresh eyes. She noticed how Greg interacted with other guests. When a white couple approached the desk moments later, he greeted them enthusiastically, even offering upgrades to their room. Another guest, an older man wearing a tailored suit, received similar treatment. But when a black family arrived shortly afterward, Greg's demeanor shifted. He avoided eye contact, spoke curtly, and shuffled papers unnecessarily. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying attention, but Victoria saw it clearly. Her chest tightened as realization dawned on her. This wasn't about a missed reservation or bad timing. It was about bias, conscious or unconscious, and it infuriated her. As the CEO of a company built on principles of inclusivity and respect, Victoria couldn't tolerate such behavior. Every employee, regardless of their position, represented her brand. If they failed to uphold its values, then she had failed as a leader. But anger alone wouldn't fix the problem. Victoria knew that revenge wasn't the answer either. What mattered most was addressing the root cause of the issue and ensuring it never happened again. With renewed determination, she rose from her seat and exited the hotel, her mind already formulating a plan. Tonight might have been humiliating, but tomorrow would bring justice, not just for her, but for everyone who deserved to feel welcome in a place that bore her name. Little did Greg, or anyone else, know Victoria Kane wasn't the type to let injustice slide. Her response would shake the foundations of her company and spark a movement that reached far beyond the hospitality industry. By the time Victoria stepped into her penthouse office, the weight of the evening's events pressed heavily on her shoulders. The sleek glass walls of her workspace reflected the glittering skyline of Atlanta. But tonight, she barely noticed its beauty. Her mind replayed every detail of the encounter at the hotel. The dismissive glance from Greg, his casual rejection, and the unsettling realization that bias had played a role in his decision. It wasn't just about her personal humiliation. It was about the broader implications of what had happened. If a black woman like herself, dressed casually but still exuding confidence, could be treated this way in her own establishment, then how many others had faced similar indignities without her level of influence or resources? Victoria sank into her chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the polished mahogany desk. She opened her laptop and accessed the hotel's internal system, pulling up real-time data on room availability. Sure enough, multiple suites and standard rooms had been vacant during the exact time Greg had told her there were no vacancies. Her jaw tightened as she scrolled through the records. The evidence confirmed what she already suspected. Greg had lied to her face. But why? And how often did something like this happen? Her thoughts spiraled further as she considered the bigger picture. This wasn't an isolated incident, it couldn't be. People didn't develop discriminatory habits overnight. There had to be patterns, systems, or attitudes within the hotel's management team that allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. Determined to uncover the truth, Victoria began digging deeper. She reviewed employee files, performance evaluations, and customer feedback reports. What she found disturbed her even more. Hidden among glowing reviews about the hotel's luxurious amenities were complaints, subtle but significant, that hinted at underlying issues. One guest mentioned being ignored by staff until they revealed they were celebrating a corporate event. Another described feeling unwelcome when trying to book a table at the hotel restaurant. While these comments weren't overtly damning, they painted a troubling picture when pieced together. It seemed that some employees operated under unspoken rules, treating certain guests with warmth while dismissing others based on appearances. Victoria's heart sank as she realized the extent of the problem. She had always prided herself on creating spaces where everyone felt valued and respected. Yet here was proof that her vision hadn't fully translated into action. Somewhere along the line, cracks had formed in the foundation of her company's culture. Cracks she hadn't noticed or perhaps hadn't wanted to see. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her executive team. They gathered around the conference table in her office, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Victoria wasted no time getting to the point. With calm precision, she recounted the events of the previous night, sparing no detail. As she spoke, the room grew silent, the weight of her words sinking in. "This isn't just about me," she emphasized. her voice steady but firm. It's about our brand, our values, and the people we serve. We claim to stand for inclusivity and respect, yet last night proved that we're falling short. I need answers, and I need them now. Her team exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked visibly uncomfortable. Victoria handed out copies of the documents she'd compiled overnight: room availability reports, customer feedback summaries, and anonymized employee testimonials. Each piece of evidence pointed to systemic issues that couldn't be ignored. We have to address this head-on, Victoria continued. Not because it's good PR, but because it's the right thing to do. Our guests trust us to provide not only comfort but also dignity. If we fail in that responsibility, then we've failed entirely. Over the course of the meeting, ideas began to flow. Suggestions ranged from mandatory diversity training sessions to revising hiring practices to ensure a more inclusive workforce. Victoria listened intently, weighing each proposal carefully. By the end of the discussion, she had outlined a multi-step plan to tackle the problem comprehensively. First, she decided to conduct a thorough audit of all Luxestay properties. External consultants specializing in workplace equity would evaluate each location, identifying areas where biases might seep into daily operations. Second, she announced plans to overhaul the company's training programs. Employees at every level, from housekeeping staff to senior managers, would undergo workshops focused on cultural sensitivity, unconscious bias, and customer service excellence. Third, Victoria vowed to hold individuals accountable for discriminatory actions. Anyone found guilty of violating the company's core values would face immediate consequences, including termination if necessary. But Victoria knew that policies alone wouldn't solve the issue. Real change required leadership, not just from her, but from everyone within the organization. To set an example, she personally reached out to several advocacy groups dedicated to racial equality and social justice. Together, they brainstormed ways to amplify marginalized voices and create opportunities for underrepresented communities. From mentoring programs for young professionals to partnerships with local schools, Victoria envisioned initiatives that would extend far beyond the confines of her hotels. As the days passed, Victoria remained laser-focused on implementing her plan. She spent hours reviewing progress reports, attending training sessions, and speaking directly with employees. Her hands-on approach earned both admiration and respect from her team, who recognized the sincerity behind her efforts. Still, she understood that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. Healing wounds inflicted by years of neglect and oversight required patience, persistence, and transparency. One evening, as she sat alone in her office, Victoria reflected on the journey ahead. The road wouldn't be easy, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about proving that businesses could lead with empathy and integrity. Every challenge she faced reminded her of why she started Luxestay in the first place, to create spaces where people felt seen, heard, and valued. Though the sting of rejection lingered, Victoria refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her emotions into action, determined to turn pain into power. For her, this wasn't just about revenge or making someone regret their mistake. It was about ensuring that no one else ever experienced the same injustice. And deep down, she knew that the changes she was spearheading would leave a lasting impact, not only on her company but on the industry as a whole. Little did anyone realize, however, that Victoria's response was only beginning. What came next would redefine the very essence of hospitality and cement her legacy as a leader unafraid to confront the hard truths head-on. The sun had barely risen over Atlanta when Victoria Kane stepped out of her car in front of the very hotel that had turned her away. This time, she wasn't alone. Flanked by members of her executive team and a group of legal advisors, she strode through the glass doors with an air of authority that demanded attention. The lobby buzzed with its usual morning activity, guests checking out, bellhops rushing around, and the faint hum of conversation. But as soon as Victoria entered, the atmosphere shifted. People paused mid-step, their eyes drawn to her commanding presence. Victoria didn't waste time. She headed straight for the manager's office, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Greg, the same clerk who had denied her entry the previous night, looked up from behind the front desk. His face paled as he recognized her. Word spread quickly among the staff. The woman they had dismissed so casually was now back, and she meant business. Inside the manager's office, Victoria wasted no time getting to the point. She introduced herself, not just as a guest, but as the owner and CEO of Luxestay Hospitality Group. The manager, a middle-aged man named Carl, seemed visibly shaken. He stammered apologies, clearly unprepared for this unexpected confrontation. But Victoria didn't come for empty words. She laid out exactly what had happened the night before, presenting screenshots of room availability records and recounting her experience in detail. "This isn't about me being inconvenienced," she said firmly, leaning forward in her chair. "It's about accountability. You work for a company that claims to stand for inclusivity and respect, yet one of your employees treated a guest, me, with blatant disregard. And based on what I've uncovered, this isn't an isolated incident." Carl tried to defend himself, blaming miscommunication or human error. But Victoria cut him off, her tone unwavering. "Human error doesn't explain why multiple guests have reported feeling unwelcome here. It doesn't explain why certain employees behave differently depending on who walks through those doors. What we're dealing with isn't a mistake, it's a pattern, and patterns demand action." With that, Victoria outlined the steps she intended to take. First, she announced that all staff at this location would undergo mandatory diversity training within the next week. Experts specializing in cultural sensitivity and unconscious bias would lead the sessions, ensuring that every employee understood the importance of treating every guest with dignity and respect. Second, she declared that any employee found guilty of discriminatory behavior would face immediate termination. There would be zero tolerance for actions that contradicted the company's values. But Victoria didn't stop there. She also revealed plans to replace Carl as the hotel's general manager. While his initial shock gave way to protests, she explained that leadership played a crucial role in setting the tone for workplace culture. If the current management couldn't ensure fairness and inclusivity, then it was time for a change. To fill the position, Victoria tapped Sarah Monroe, a seasoned hospitality professional known for her commitment to equity and excellence. Sarah had worked with Victoria on several projects in the past, and her reputation for fostering positive environments made her the perfect choice. As news of these decisions spread throughout the hotel, reactions varied. Some employees felt relief, grateful that someone was finally addressing long-standing issues. Others grew defensive, arguing that the changes were unnecessary or unfair. But Victoria remained resolute. She addressed the entire staff during an impromptu meeting in the hotel's conference room, making sure everyone understood the gravity of the situation. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," she told them, her voice steady but compassionate. "I'm doing it because our guests deserve better. Each of you represents Luxestay not just to the people who walk through these doors, but to the world. When we fail to live up to our promises, we lose trust, and once trust is gone, it's nearly impossible to rebuild." To drive her message home, Victoria shared stories from her own life, moments when she had faced discrimination or prejudice, simply because of the color of her skin. She spoke openly about the challenges she had overcome to build Luxestay, emphasizing how much she valued hard work, integrity, and kindness. Her vulnerability resonated with many in the room, softening some of the resistance she encountered. In addition to addressing internal issues, Victoria knew she needed to restore faith among her guests. She personally drafted a letter that would be sent to all recent visitors of the hotel, apologizing for any negative experiences they might have endured. She also implemented a new feedback system, encouraging guests to report concerns anonymously, so that problems could be addressed promptly. Transparency, she believed, was key to rebuilding trust. Over the following days, Victoria immersed herself in overseeing the transition. She attended the first round of diversity training sessions, sitting alongside employees as they learned about the impact of bias and the importance of empathy. She walked the halls of the hotel, speaking directly with staff members and listening, to their thoughts and concerns. Some were hesitant at first, unsure whether her efforts were genuine, but as they saw her dedication firsthand, many began to open up, sharing ideas on how to improve both the workplace environment and the guest experience. One evening, as Victoria reviewed progress reports in her office, she reflected on the whirlwind of changes she had set in motion. It hadn't been easy. Pushing for accountability often meant facing pushback, and holding difficult conversations required emotional strength. But she reminded herself why she was doing this. Not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to feel welcome in a place that bore her name. Still, Victoria knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. Rebuilding a culture rooted in respect and inclusivity would take time, effort, and constant vigilance. Yet, as she looked out at the city skyline, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead were daunting, but she was ready to face them head-on. After all, true leadership wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about learning from them and using them as opportunities to grow. What Victoria didn't realize yet was that her actions were about to spark something much larger than she had anticipated. The ripple effects of her decision would extend far beyond the walls of this single hotel, inspiring others to confront similar issues in their own industries. For now, though, she focused on the task at hand, determined to prove that even the most entrenched biases could be dismantled, one step at a time. By the time Victoria Kane finished implementing the initial wave of changes at the hotel, her story had already begun to spread. Word of what had happened and how she responded leaked beyond the confines of Lux Stay Hospitality Group. First, it was just whispers among Atlanta's business community. A CEO denied entry to her own hotel? The idea was almost unbelievable. But soon, details emerged, painting a picture of systemic bias and Victoria's bold steps to address it. It wasn't long before journalists caught wind of the situation, eager to dig deeper into the drama. Victoria didn't shy away from the attention. In fact, she embraced it as an opportunity to amplify her message. Sitting down for interviews with local news outlets, she recounted her experience in vivid detail, holding nothing back. She spoke candidly about the sting of rejection, the discovery of discriminatory patterns within her company, and the measures she was taking to ensure such incidents never happened again. Her authenticity resonated with viewers, turning what could have been a fleeting scandal into a powerful narrative about accountability and change. One evening, after a particularly emotional interview, Victoria decided to take her story directly to the people. She logged onto her social media accounts, a platform she rarely used personally, and posted a heartfelt message. In the post, she shared photos from her early days in business, juxtaposed with images of the luxurious hotels she now owned. "Success doesn't shield you from prejudice," she wrote. "Last night I was denied entry to my own hotel because of assumptions based on how I looked. This isn't just my story. It's a reflection of biases that exist everywhere. We can do better." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, her post went viral, sparking conversations across platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Hashtags like #RespectForAll and #Inclusive Hospitality began trending, with users sharing their own experiences of discrimination in various industries. Some praised Victoria for using her position to drive meaningful change, while others expressed frustration that such issues still existed in 2023. Regardless of perspective, one thing was clear: her story had struck a nerve. Inspired by the outpouring of support, Victoria realized she had tapped into something bigger than herself. People weren't just talking about her. They were talking about the need for systemic reform. And so she seized the moment, launching the Lux Stay Equity Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in hospitality. The initiative focused on 3 key areas: education, advocacy, and community engagement. First, Victoria partnered with universities and trade schools to create scholarships for students from underrepresented backgrounds interested in pursuing careers in hospitality. These scholarships covered tuition, books, and even internships at Lux Estate properties, providing recipients with hands-on experience and mentorship. For many young people who might never have considered entering the industry due to financial barriers or lack of representation, this was life-changing. Second, the initiative worked to advocate for policy changes both within Luxestay and across the broader hospitality sector. Victoria assembled a team of experts, including lawyers, sociologists, and former hotel employees, to draft guidelines aimed at eliminating discriminatory practices. These included everything from standardized training protocols to anonymous reporting systems for guests and staff. The goal was simple: to set a new standard for inclusivity that other companies could follow. Finally, Victoria prioritized community engagement, organizing workshops and town halls in cities where Luxestay operated. These events brought together local leaders, activists, and residents to discuss issues ranging from racial profiling to economic inequality. By fostering open dialogue, Victoria hoped to bridge gaps between businesses and the communities they served. As the Luxestay Equity initiative gained momentum, Victoria became a sought-after speaker at conferences and panel discussions. She traveled extensively, sharing her insights with audiences around the world. Whether addressing a room full of executives or speaking to high school students dreaming of entrepreneurship, she remained steadfast in her belief that true success came not from profits but from impact. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Industry publications hailed her as a trailblazer, praising her willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Competitors, once dismissive of her approach, began adopting similar initiatives within their own organizations. Even critics who initially questioned her motives found themselves admiring her determination. Slowly but surely, Victoria was reshaping the conversation around equity and hospitality. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of her journey was the feedback she received from everyday people. Strangers reached out to thank her for shining a light on issues they had faced silently for years. A mother wrote to say her teenage daughter now dreamed of working in hospitality. Inspired by Victoria's example, a retired hotel worker expressed gratitude for finally feeling heard after decades of witnessing bias go unchecked. Each message reinforced Victoria's conviction that her work mattered, not just for her company, but for society as a whole. Despite the accolades, Victoria stayed grounded. She knew that real progress required more than good intentions. It demanded sustained effort. To keep herself accountable, she established quarterly reviews to assess the effectiveness of the equity initiative. Metrics like employee satisfaction rates, guest feedback scores, and diversity statistics became benchmarks for success. If numbers slipped or goals fell short, she didn't hesitate to adjust strategies accordingly. Even as she celebrated victories, Victoria remained acutely aware of the challenges ahead. Change, she often reminded herself, was a marathon, not a sprint. There would always be resistance, from those unwilling to adapt to new norms or fearful of losing privilege. Yet she refused to let cynicism dampen her resolve. Instead, she channeled every obstacle into fuel for her mission. Late one night, as she scrolled through messages of gratitude on her phone, Victoria paused to reflect. What started as a deeply personal affront had blossomed into a movement far greater than she ever imagined. Her pain had become purpose, and her struggle had sparked hope for countless others. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, she felt confident in one truth. When faced with injustice, silence was never an option. Standing up, speaking out, and taking action, that was how you turned adversity into progress. And so, Victoria continued forward, driven by the belief that respect wasn't just a value, it was a right, one that everyone deserved, no matter who they were or where they came from. Months had passed since Victoria Kane first walked into her hotel and was turned away, an experience that ignited a transformative journey, not just for her company but for the hospitality industry as a whole. The changes she implemented were beginning to take root, and the results were undeniable. Employees at the Buckhead Hotel, once resistant to the sweeping reforms, now approached their work with renewed energy and purpose. Guests noticed the shift almost immediately. From the warm smiles of front desk clerks to the thoughtful gestures of housekeeping staff, the atmosphere radiated authenticity and care. When the hotel reopened its doors following weeks of intensive training and restructuring, It wasn't just a physical space anymore, it was a symbol of progress. Every detail, from the redesigned welcome packets featuring messages about inclusivity to the newly installed feedback kiosks in the lobby, reflected Victoria's vision. But what truly set this property apart was the culture within its walls. Employees no longer treated diversity as a checkbox exercise. They embraced it as a core value. Regular workshops ensured that lessons on empathy and cultural sensitivity stayed fresh in everyone's minds, while leadership encouraged open dialogue about challenges and successes. One afternoon, Victoria visited the hotel unannounced, eager to see firsthand how her efforts had translated into action. As she wandered through the lobby, she observed interactions between staff and guests with pride. A young concierge greeted a family of tourists with enthusiasm, offering personalized recommendations for exploring Atlanta. At the cafe counter, a barista patiently helped an elderly guest navigate the menu, even printing out large font options for easier reading. These small yet meaningful moments reminded Victoria why she started LuxStay in the first place: to create spaces where people felt seen, heard, and valued. Her presence didn't go unnoticed. When Sarah Monroe, the new general manager, spotted Victoria, she rushed over with a wide grin. "Ms. Kane," she said warmly, "it's so good to have you here. Let me show you around." Together, they toured the facility, stopping occasionally to chat with employees and guests alike. One couple staying in one of the suites shared glowing feedback about their stay, praising the attention to detail and exceptional service. Another guest, a solo traveler who identified as non-binary, expressed gratitude for feeling respected during their visit, a testament to the inclusive language now embedded in staff training manuals. Each story reinforced Victoria's belief that change was possible when leaders prioritized humanity over profit. But Victoria's influence extended far beyond this single location. Across all LuxStay properties, similar transformations were underway. Diversity committees formed at each hotel, tasked with identifying areas for improvement and celebrating milestones along the way. Employee resource groups provided safe spaces for marginalized team members to connect and advocate for themselves. Meanwhile, the LuxStay Equity Initiative continued to grow, partnering with organizations outside the hospitality sector to tackle systemic inequities on a larger scale. The ripple effects of Victoria's actions reached unexpected corners of society. In Chicago, a high school student named Marcus won a scholarship funded by the initiative and landed an internship at a local LuxStay hotel. Inspired by Victoria's story, he began mentoring younger students in his neighborhood, encouraging them to dream big despite systemic barriers. In Los Angeles, a community activist collaborated with LuxStay to host a series of job fairs aimed at reducing unemployment rates among underrepresented groups. Stories like these flooded Victoria's inbox daily, reminding her that her decision to act had sparked a chain reaction of positivity. Back in Atlanta, Victoria used her growing platform to push for broader industry reform. She joined forces with other CEOs and advocacy groups to draft a universal code of conduct for hospitality businesses worldwide. This document outlined best practices for promoting inclusivity, addressing bias, and fostering equitable workplaces. Though adoption wasn't mandatory, many companies voluntarily signed on, recognizing the importance of aligning with evolving societal expectations. Critics who once doubted Victoria's methods slowly began to soften their stance. Some admitted they had underestimated the depth of her commitment, while others acknowledged that her approach yielded tangible benefits, not just for employees and guests, but also for the bottom line. Studies showed that hotels embracing diversity initiatives saw increased customer loyalty and higher revenue streams. For skeptics still clinging to outdated models, the data spoke louder than words. Even so, Victoria remained vigilant. She understood that maintaining momentum required constant effort. To keep herself accountable, she established annual reviews where independent auditors assessed LuxStay's progress toward equity goals. Results were published transparently, allowing stakeholders to track improvements over time. If certain metrics fell short, corrective measures were implemented promptly. Despite the accolades and achievements, Victoria never lost sight of her roots. She frequently returned to the neighborhoods where she grew up, hosting events to engage with residents and learn about their needs. During one such gathering, a young woman approached her nervously, clutching a resume. "I've always wanted to work in hospitality," she confessed, "but I never thought someone like me could make it." Victoria smiled gently, taking the paper from her hands. "Someone like you is exactly who we need," she replied. Arrangements were made for the young woman to shadow employees at a nearby Luxestay hotel, giving her a glimpse into potential career paths. Moments like these reminded Victoria that representation mattered, not just in boardrooms but in every corner of the workplace. As the months turned into years, Victoria's legacy solidified. Her name became synonymous with integrity and innovation, inspiring countless others to challenge the status quo. Textbooks featured case studies on her leadership style, highlighting how she navigated adversity with grace and determination. Award ceremonies celebrated her contributions to social justice, though she often redirected praise to her team and the communities they served. Still, Victoria knew her journey was far from over. While significant strides had been made, pockets of resistance lingered. Some executives clung to traditional hierarchies, reluctant to embrace inclusive practices. Others paid lip service to equity without enacting real change. For Victoria, these obstacles only fueled her resolve. She understood that true transformation took time and patience. One evening, as she stood on the rooftop terrace of her penthouse office, gazing at the glittering city below, Victoria allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. What had started as a personal affront had evolved into something much greater. A movement rooted in respect, empathy, and accountability. Along the way, she had faced criticism, doubt, and fear. But none of it compared to the joy of seeing lives transformed because of her choices. Victoria didn't seek revenge or validation when she decided to confront the discrimination she experienced. Instead, she chose to lead by example, proving that even the most entrenched biases could be dismantled with courage and conviction. And as she looked toward the future, she felt confident that her work would continue to inspire others long after she stepped away from the spotlight. The road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges, but Victoria welcomed them with open arms. After all, she had learned that growth came not from avoiding difficulties but from embracing them head-on. With each step forward, she carried the hopes and dreams of those counting on her to pave the way for a more inclusive world. Years had passed since Victoria Kane first stood in the lobby of her own hotel, denied entry by an employee who judged her based on appearance. What began as a deeply personal affront had grown into a movement that transcended industries and inspired generations. The changes she spearheaded at Luxestay Hospitality Group weren't just about fixing one broken system. They became a blueprint for organizations worldwide striving to create more equitable spaces. As time went on, Victoria's influence stretched far beyond business metrics or profit margins. It shaped hearts, minds, and policies. Victoria's commitment to inclusivity never wavered. Even as her company expanded globally, new hotels opened in cities like London, Tokyo, and Cape Town, each designed not only with luxury in mind but also with principles of accessibility and representation woven into their very fabric. For instance, every property featured multilingual signage, gender-neutral restrooms, and partnerships with local artisans from underrepresented communities. These initiatives ensured that guests felt welcomed regardless of language, identity, or background. But perhaps the most profound impact of Victoria's leadership was felt within her workforce. Under her guidance, Luxestay became known as a place where employees thrived, not just professionally but personally. Training programs evolved to include mental health resources, financial literacy workshops, and career development opportunities tailored to individual goals. Employees often described working for Luxestay as more than a job, citing the sense of belonging fostered by its inclusive culture. One housekeeper in Paris remarked during an interview, "I used to think hospitality was just cleaning rooms and serving food. But here, I feel like my voice matters, like I'm part of something bigger." The ripple effects of Victoria's efforts extended well beyond her own company. Inspired by the Luxestate Equity Initiative, other businesses began adopting similar practices. Airlines revamped their customer service protocols to address bias. Retail chains introduced diversity quotas for management positions. Even tech startups, notorious for homogeneity, started prioritizing equity in hiring processes. Industry conferences now regularly featured panels on inclusion, with Victoria frequently invited to speak. Her message remained consistent. True, success wasn't measured by revenue alone. It was defined by the positive impact you left behind. As her fame grew, so did her responsibilities. Victoria found herself balancing dual roles: CEO of a multinational corporation and advocate for global change. She traveled extensively, meeting with world leaders, educators, and activists to discuss ways to dismantle systemic inequities. Yet, despite her packed schedule, she made it a point to stay connected to the people whose lives she touched. Whether visiting schools funded by the Equity Initiative or sitting down with frontline workers at her hotels, Victoria listened intently, ensuring her decisions reflected real-world needs rather than abstract ideals. Her humility endeared her to many. Despite her accomplishments, she never sought the spotlight for herself. Instead, she amplified others' voices, using her platform to highlight stories of resilience and triumph. In interviews, she often redirected praise to her team, saying things like, "This isn't my victory, it's ours." Her authenticity resonated deeply, earning her admiration from colleagues and competitors alike. One day, while attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new Luxestate hotel in Johannesburg, South Africa, Victoria encountered a young woman named Thandiwe, a former scholarship recipient turned assistant manager. Thandiwe approached Victoria with tears in her eyes. "You changed my life," she said softly. "Because of you, I can provide for my family and dream of opening my own hotel someday." Victoria smiled warmly, placing a hand on Thandiwe's shoulder. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Thank yourself for having the courage to believe in your potential. All I did was give you a chance." Moments like these reminded Victoria why she continued pushing forward despite setbacks and challenges. Every promotion awarded, every barrier broken, and every tear shed out of gratitude fueled her determination to keep going. She knew that no single person could solve centuries-old injustices overnight. But together, progress was possible. Even as Victoria aged, her passion for justice burned brighter than ever. When she eventually stepped down as CEO, handing over the reins to a diverse board of directors committed to upholding her values, she didn't retire quietly. Instead, she devoted herself entirely to advocacy work, founding a global coalition aimed at eradicating discrimination across all sectors. From fashion to finance, education to entertainment, this coalition brought together changemakers dedicated to creating a fairer, kinder world. Her legacy lived on through countless lives transformed by her vision. Former interns rose to executive positions, carrying forward lessons learned under her mentorship. Communities once overlooked by corporations flourished thanks to partnerships forged through the Equity Initiative. And though Victoria eventually passed away peacefully at the age of 82, surrounded by loved ones, her story endured as a testament to the power of perseverance and purpose. Decades later, historians would write about Victoria Kane not merely as a successful entrepreneur, but as a revolutionary who redefined what it meant to lead with integrity. Textbooks highlighted how she turned a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for change, proving that adversity could be harnessed for good. Statues were erected in her honor, plaques commemorated her contributions, and awards bore her name. Yet perhaps the most fitting tribute came from ordinary people around the globe, guests checking into hotels, students graduating with scholarships, workers thriving in inclusive environments, all living proof that respect truly was non-negotiable. Victoria's journey taught the world an invaluable lesson. When faced with injustice, silence is complicity, but action ignites transformation. By choosing to confront bias head-on, she didn't just rebuild her company, she rebuilt trust, dignity, and hope for millions. And though she may have walked away from the physical spaces she created, Her spirit lingered in every corner of every Lux Estate property, whispering to future generations, respect everyone, always.